Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel, and folks, we've been waiting for this to be released literally 4 months, and due to local court orders, we did have to wait until just a couple days ago for this transcript to actually be released. And we're sitting here at a point as XRP community members, just understanding that any day we could get the news drop that Judge Torres in the SEC v. Ripple case has made her final determination. And it just is so interesting. Like, I still am the type that does believe that justice is most likely to actually be done. It's, no justice system is perfect, and certainly not ours here in the United States, but more likely than not, what is done should be done. But even so, it is the case that judges are humans and they can make mistakes. Sometimes rulings are bad and they end up getting appealed and ultimately overturned, and stuff like that can happen. And it's just so interesting to see as it pertains to the SEC v. LBRY case, which we found out, when was it? Was it early November when the news dropped that LBRY lost, the SEC had won. It was just so interesting to see the judges seemingly, in many places, like just subjective opinion that people who were buying the LBRY credit token, LBC token, they should have known that that they'd be counting effectively, and I'm paraphrasing here obviously, on the efforts of LBRY to make that token worth more. And it's just so interesting to see that, because the judge then spoke out of the other side of his mouth, and he's like, okay, but I recognize that there's utility and that there are all sorts of individuals that hold LBC that like don't know anything about the LBRY organization itself. And it's just so interesting to see that. Now, are we going to see something like that from Judge Torres? I sure as hell hope not. I mean, it is good to know that when it comes to the remedies portion, and that still needs to be released too, it's good to know that the judges at least publicly, articulated that he's, not going to include secondary market transactions in the decision against LBRY itself. So that's good. So that should, in theory, protect LBC. But, at what cost? It's just so fascinating, because the words in this transcript from this court appearance, it was November 21st of last year, 2022. There are very powerful words in here. In fact, Mr. Kaufman, the founder of LBRY himself, he actually called the SEC attorney a liar in front of the judge, which frankly is kind of satisfying. So I'm not going to go through this whole transcript because it's 39 pages, but John Deaton's crypto law organization on Twitter highlighted some of the most interesting stuff. And I do want to share that with you, because there's some interesting back and forth, and like the judge is trying to cut off Kaufman, and then he continues to talk. It was just interesting. It didn't disappoint in terms of interesting. But before going further ado, and be clear, I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I'm not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, and so here you have from John Deaton's crypto law organization, shared on Twitter. Just added to our document library in SEC v. LBRY. Full transcript, November 21st, 2022. Status hearing between LBRY and SEC. No longer under redaction restriction. And so again, like I said, we've been waiting for this for a long time. Some of the content had been described by Attorney John Deaton in terms of what actually happened, but now we get to see it word for word, verbatim, what actually unfolded here. And so anyway, crypto law continues. In this status hearing on the remedies a LBRY would have to pay, Jeremy Kaufman asks to speak directly to the judge on how the SEC has turned down every remedies offer he made in context of 5 years of refusing to say what the rules were before suing him. And so here you have the following. He's saying this to the judge, and again, this past November, and this is what he said verbatim to the judge. Well, I promise not to talk for too long, but I just wanted to be sort of explicit about the current situation. I mean, we have been going back and forth with the SEC for 5 years. Throughout that entire period, we have begged them. We've said we will do anything, make any changes. Like there are other currencies like Ethereum and Bitcoin that have this non-securities designation. We've said we offered years ago we'll destroy the entire pre-mine. We offered years ago we'll fold the entire company and give you every dollar in our bank accounts. All that we have ever wanted was to achieve the same legal status that these other cryptocurrencies have. There are so many smart people who want to be building and working in this field. Everyone in my company, whether we work at LBRY or not, wants to keep doing this work. And I thought for sure that by the end of this, we would at least know what they are. And still no one does. So pause to think about that. And this is astonishing. And I've seen Jeremy say this before, so this part wasn't surprising to me, but it's such a good point. Like, at a minimum, even in a disaster scenario for LBRY, which is effectively what happened here for the organization itself anyway, because they're going to cease to exist, it looks like. Well, he always thought, at the minimum, the messy, destructive process would still certainly result in some sort of clarity for the crypto space, would it not? Well, the answer is no, it does not. I know that's ridiculous. Half a freaking decade, all this destruction, nobody actually protected as a result of this, just utter devastation. And where are we? Or is anyone better off? Of course not. So the point's not lost on it. And then Kaufman says, and we're going to end up in a situation like I honestly don't care about arguing the penalties. I mean, you guys have won. LBRY is almost certainly dead. It's almost certainly all dead. The SEC's objective of bankrupting us through the process, which they threatened privately 3 years ago, they succeeded. So we're not trying to fight. Let's pause and note, in case you hadn't heard that before, this is how disgusting the SEC is. They literally, it's not about justice and protecting investors. They literally came right out aggressively, and I don't think that this is remotely ethical, but they cited their intent. They literally a few years ago threatened, hey, we're going to bankrupt you. Because, it's so fine technically, the SEC doesn't have infinite money. They do have a big ass budget, but, they're not, their litigation and whatever, the SEC pays their lawyers, the SEC is not at risk of ceasing to exist or going bankrupt. Like, that's not, it's part of the government, folks. But here, they're just oppressive towards an actual entrepreneur here in the space, threatening to put him out of business, not providing clarity. I just find it repulsive. And then Kaufman says, but I just don't know if you appreciate the amount of chaos that has been created by this decision and the complete lack of understanding that the industry still has about what they can and cannot do. And so I'll pause and note, he's telling this to the judge directly to his face. And this is after the judge ruled against him. So he's saying, so this is Kaufman saying to the judge, I don't know that you understand exactly what you've done by coming down here with this ruling that you've had. He's saying it to his face, which frankly is satisfying. And then he says, but we would destroy everything if, for example, the SEC would make it clear that secondary sales aren't security sales. They're still going to argue that they are. And that's true, and the SEC has continued to argue that, but we did get some good news, at least. I guess it was, if memory serves, at the end of January. I think that's when the news broke on that. During the remedies portion, the judge did articulate that secondary markets would not be considered part of his decision here. So that part actually is good, very good, in fact, and kind of scolded the SEC attorney. So that part actually was satisfying. And it's just so interesting to see how poor the actual ruling is against the LBRY. But then still, the judge did come back and understood that secondary market sales should not be included. So that part was actually very, very, very positive. And then John Deaton's Crypto Law Twitter account here wrote, Judge Paul Barbadoro expresses sympathy for LBRY's situation and asks the SEC why it won't resolve remaining questions on remedies and secondary market status for LBC so there is clarity for LBC holders. And so we knew, thanks to Attorney John Deaton, that this is something that occurred. The judge was pushing back against the SEC. Why aren't you just providing this clarity? And the judge did say, I don't know if it's highlighted by these screen grabs from Crypto Law, but there was a certain portion where the judge even said, look, I'm not omnipotent. I can't force the SEC to do certain things in terms of providing this clarity, only on an actual factual legal basis. But he certainly was, in this case, siding with LBC holders and with Jeremy Kaufman. So here's a quote from the judge in this case. He said, but I would like the SEC's response here. Why shouldn't we take this opportunity to try to resolve what's left of this dispute? If necessary, preserve LBRY's ability to appeal my decision, if that's what it's choosing to do, but also if, as Mr. Kaufman is hinting, that the company's basically dead anyways, Why are we wasting a lot of time in trying to get disgorgement of a company that isn't going to survive? And is there something we can do to provide greater clarity? For example, what's the SEC's position with respect to people who are holding the LBC token right now other than LBRY? So, folks, think about this. He ruled against LBRY, acknowledged right there, it's on your screen. Yeah, there's not sufficient clarity, and LBRY still loses. What kind of upside down BS world is this? This is not a good ruling. And then he says, so can you give me your thoughts about is there anything we can do from the SEC's perspective that will help to resolve what's left of this dispute by agreement? And ultimately, obviously, you know that the SEC's response is no. And then here you have SEC attorney Peter Moore responding dismissively, as Crypto Law put it. So here's the SEC attorney who said, we were skeptical of the efficacy of the mediation based upon sort of past discussions, Your Honor, and I apologize if I didn't make that clear in terms of, what would be a faster and more efficient way forward. And I'm not going to try to address a lot of what Mr. Kaufman said, but with respect to discussions that we've had in the past with LBRY's counsel, this is the end of 2022. We have had numerous discussions with LBRY's counsel over the years about what would be a pathway in which the sort of offer and sale of LBC would not be a security. And year after year went by and sort of none of those discussions sort of changed the policies or practices that LBRY, and then it cuts off here. So, but again, the takeaway that I want you to have from the SEC attorney, he's claiming that there were discussions about a path forward provided to Jeremy Kaufman and LBRY about how LBC would not be a security. Now, this is where it gets spicy. So check this out. Crypto Law writes, in an anguished response to Moore, Kaufman goes to the very heart of the SEC's abuse of his company and every company it is suing. This is what Ripple and XRP holders are facing. This is what Coinbase and everyone will face. This is what Gary Gensler is doing. Well articulated, Crypto Law. And that's a big part of why I wanted to highlight this. This is the crap that we are up against as XRP holders, so just be aware. We could get a disaster ruling here. Now, I'm still optimistic that we're going to see something more positive from Judge Torres, but this type of thing is possible for us as XRP holders. And so here's a transcription. So again, this is after the SEC attorney claims that they did explain how to go about performing their business and making sure that LBC wouldn't be perceived as some sort of investment contract as a security. And so this is where Mr. Kaufman, Jeremy Kaufman, jumps in and he just says, literally, it's on your screen right there. He says, "You are a liar, Peter." So he's literally calling out to the SEC attorney as a liar in front of the judge. And Jeremy Kaufman's telling the truth there. And then the court jumps in, that's how it's listed here. That just means the judge. But it's listed as the court, so I'll just read it as that. The court says, wait. Mr. Kaufman does not wait, though. Mr. Kaufman says, you are lying right now and then the judge jumps in and says, stop. Mr. Kaufman does not stop, though, and then finishes his sentence, judge's face. So again, you are lying right now to the judge's face. You are a liar. You are a liar, sir. And then the court jumps in and says, Mr. Kaufman. But Mr. Kaufman continues to speak, and he says, how could you not feel sympathy right here? After half a decade, operating in good faith, trying to do things in a legal way when there's not sufficient clarity, how could you not have sympathy for this man here? And so Mr. Kaufman says, I will do anything. They can say it right now. I will destroy the company. I'll give them every dollar in the bank account. I will fire everyone. I will shut down everything, and I will give you the pre-mine. Is it not a security now, Peter? And so again, that's the SEC attorney. Would that make it not be a security? And that that attorney is never gonna be like, oh yeah, of course it's not a security. But therein lies the problem. It's not about honesty. They don't want to give up any ground so that in future litigation they can keep bringing the hammer down. It's a jurisdictional land grab, and it's atrocious, and it harms the investors that they're supposed to be protecting here. It's repulsive. And so then the judge jumps back in. The court says, Mr. Kaufman. And Jeremy Kaufman continues to speak, though, and he simply says, these are simple questions. If the rule of law is real, that these are questions that are answerable, so why can't anyone tell me if that's legal? If the rule of law is clear and fair notice isn't a defense, because the average person can understand the law, then these are very clear questions that ought to have yes and no answers that the regulators ought to be able to answer. Golf clap for Mr. Kaufman, everybody. Absolutely spot on. I have nothing but sympathy for this man in this situation and everybody that's been negatively impacted as a result of this. And this is the type of crap that we're fighting against. The SEC is an absolute monster. So there's that. But again, for a number of reasons that I've been articulating for quite a long time, I'm certainly more optimistic for our community, the XRP community, and what might happen in the SEC v. Ripple case. And the way that it was, the way that the case to this point has been fought by Ripple's legal team is honestly probably a much better approach. And not that all the circumstances were the same anyway, of course they're not. But, when it comes to Ripple, like, they're pushing back against all the prongs of the Howey test. And, in this case, LBRY, unfortunately, for whatever reason, they ceded a couple of those. So it was just left to one prong of the Howey test, if memory serves. And they could have fought. In hindsight, they probably realized that was a bad move. They should have just fought back on everything, find a way to argue. But it didn't work out. And then this arbitrary decision by the judge to just say, okay, yeah, but and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said, yeah, okay, but I think that people should have just known. Oh, okay. The purchasers of LBC, they should have known or they did know. It was that type of argument. And I said, well, what the hell is that? That's not how securities law is supposed to work. What are you talking about? Oh, God. I understand a judge has to ultimately come down with a decision, but the argument was, the rationale for it is just so piss poor. It doesn't make any damn bit of sense. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because if anything I say are right, that would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.